Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue our journey with Meka and Michael. I think they're going to have their couples session in this episode because all the other couples are having their therapy session with the marriage and family therapist. So let's get to it and see if anything of interest comes out of my face as I watch this show.
I'm really at my breaking point with Michael and all of his lies. It's too far out of my ability to help him. I've agreed to sit down with Michael and Dr. Viviana today so she can give us her professional advice on how to fix this. Hi. Hello. I like that dress. Because if Michael cannot stop lying to me, I'm not going to be in his marriage. It's honestly just that simple.
I'm really happy that the marriage and family therapist is finally showing up, seemingly after their relationship is over. Hopefully, she can get to the bottom of Michael's, what I'm believing to be traumas that motivate his defenses that result in him lying. So let's see if we can get some of that conversation going. If I was going to talk to Michael, I would ask him about his childhood, and I would try to make him feel as safe as possible, because I believe that when he feels unsafe, which I think it's pretty easy for him to feel unsafe given his relational traumas, total speculation, he quickly resorts to defenses including deception and lying and evading. So it's going to be a tricky task to help Michael to feel safe enough to talk about whatever it is that is underlying what seems to be a pretty frequent behavior of untruths.
What's going on with your emotional intimacy and with honesty and transparency?
He's not been truthful about his salary.
It's not a black and white issue.
Why is that? Why isn't it just oh, you want to know how much I make? This is why. Good.
Great question. Just cut to the heart of the matter. Now, if I was the therapist, I wouldn't start here because this is going to, I'm guessing, feel to Michael as if two people are ganging up against him. He's going to feel unsafe. He's going to have an increase in adrenaline and stress hormones. He's going to go to that defensive place in his mind, and then he's not going to be able to come back from that. So I would have actually said, if I was the therapist, and this isn't a real therapy session, to be clear, this is a scene in a TV show, I would have said, okay, so Meka, I totally get it that you want to talk about that topic, and we'll definitely get to that. But I want to start with something first. Michael, let's talk about who you are and your emotions. How do you feel right now? How did you feel yesterday? I want to get a sense for your emotional state. And maybe I'd go to Meka. Let's talk about your emotions, kind of even the playing field. Then I might get to both people's pasts. And then the lying I might add on later of just like, oh, so is that why you might come across as if you're lying frequently to Meka because of that thing? Or help them to lead the way. But to just jump into what might be very triggering for Michael might set the session off in a wrong direction that you can't recover from.
There was a little bit of, I think, embarrassment and fear. There was an opportunity that I had prior to the job that I ended up taking where there was a significant difference. And by no virtue of my own, it didn't work out. And there was a bit of a panic and a scramble to, I think, just be gainfully employed.
So 2 thumbs up, Michael. Now, he is saying it in an extremely subdued manner that doesn't inspire others to really understand what's really happening for him. He sounds very intellectual as he's talking about something extremely emotional for him. He said embarrassed and afraid. Embarrassed and fear or some panic. Those are very powerful words that I hope the therapist really focuses on. The way Michael comes across, it's like intellectual, yeah, I was embarrassed and afraid. But he is cutting to the heart of the matter, which is great. He is saying I was embarrassed. I was hoping I would have been earning more money by this point. And I was embarrassed by the fact that I'm not earning that much. And I was afraid. I wish he would identify what he was afraid of. Like, I was afraid that if I told Meka what I was really earning, she was going to yell at me and maybe even divorce me. And so that's why I was evasive, maybe even being deceptive as I was talking about my salary. So this is a really great start for Michael. But I hope that the therapist can really help to expand on what he packed in there. Let's rewind and watch that again.
There was a little bit of, I think, embarrassment and fear. There was an opportunity that I had prior to the job that I ended up taking where there was a significant difference. And by no virtue of my own, it didn't work out. And there was a bit of a panic and a scramble to, I think, just be gainfully employed.
What questions do you have for him? Because I know that you're reacting. I can feel it.
He had so many opportunities to say how you actually felt.
Now, I'm guessing many people would look at this and say, well, this isn't a real therapy session, so why should I criticize it? This is a TV show. This is for entertainment. But if this was a real therapy session, the therapist really missed an opportunity there. She asked what I believe to be a too quick of a question to Michael. But Michael rose to the occasion and actually said, emotions, emotions, emotions. That's why I might have been lying about that. He didn't say that explicitly, but that was basically what he was saying. Then the therapist kind of feels Meka's energy. And instead of trying to soothe that by, continuing to grow the safety for Michael, she turns to Meka and unleashes the Kraken, and Meka comes out swinging. Now, Meka has every reason to be angry. There are so many potential reasons why Meka would be upset and completely done with the relationship. So I'm not going to blame Meka for having feelings and for being hurt and for being done. But if the purpose of this meeting was to somehow facilitate understanding or at the very least just forgiveness or something, that wasn't the right move. But maybe the therapist can pull it back from the brink.
Now he's expressing it when he's called out on the fact that he's lying. That's not fair to me. You've been lying to me. Like, you're not the victim. You're lying to me.
This is a really bad cycle you're on, right?
I mean, I definitely think there's like a cycle going on because for me, I feel like I need you to be honest so that I can be vulnerable. And he feels like I need you to be vulnerable so I can be honest. So it's like one of us has to start.
This has been a barrier to intimacy from very early on because that's what you've told me.
Now, that's interesting. So as a systems thinker, I very much appreciate what Meka is saying, but I think what Michael and Meka both believe to be true, which is a systemic conceptualization of their conflict. The words they're using, I wouldn't have framed it that way, but the words they're using is, in order for him to stop lying, she has to be more vulnerable. And for her to be more vulnerable, he has to stop lying. And the reverse, you could say, true. If he were to not lie, if he were to be honest, then she would be vulnerable. And if she were vulnerable, then he would be honest. But that's great that they see that connection. The way that Meka and Michael are seeing it, at least in this moment, seemingly is, well, I'm not going to budge if they don't budge. I'm not going to stop lying if she's not going to be vulnerable. And then she's saying, well, I'm not going to, be vulnerable if he's not going to stop lying. And you're at a standstill there. Right? So it takes some inspiration. You have to have a reason to try, right? And I don't know if they have a reason to try. So I will say I don't really know why this session or this meeting is taking place. As I always say, in real therapy, what needs to be established at the beginning of at least treatment is what the couple wants from the professional. So I, as a couples therapist, will, at least in the beginning sessions, the first number of sessions, I will be very clear when I ask, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want this meeting to accomplish? Because the way that they often have these meetings, because they're not real therapy, in my estimation, is the therapist just walks in and just starts asking a bunch of questions. Because it's possible that one or both of these individuals, they don't want help. They don't want help with putting them back together as a couple. They're done. And so to forge ahead as if they do want to come back together would be working counter to other people's wishes. The other thing that I might throw out there, so I might sit down with this couple and say, so I don't know if you want this meeting to come together or to explain to each other why you're breaking up, or to break up nicely, or to explore things, or to get things off your chest. What would you like to do? So when I watch this scene, I don't know what the couple wants, and thus I don't know how to evaluate the actions of this meeting, because everything that the therapist does is, I guess, just based on what the therapist just has in their own agenda, not necessarily what's on the couple's agenda.
I think I never really fully processed the effect of not having my mom around has manifested itself in a multitude of areas of my life. And for a long time, I made it be okay. And I've created or allowed creation of narratives about her to not be bad by comparison, because that's not how you talk about.
Okay, so it's great that Michael is going there. I don't know if Meka's having it at this point. I think she might be beyond a certain threshold of caring or of empathy at this point for Michael. But I'm glad that Michael is at least going there for his own sake, for his own healing, for his own awareness. And potentially Meka, even though she might be 2 feet out the door, might say, oh, okay, well, I guess I understand Michael a little better as to why he would have done those things. So we see a little bit of emotion in him. We see him tearing up a little bit. We hear it in his voice. I'm happy that he's able to feel safe enough to express that. I hear in what he's saying, I'm guessing that behind that little detail, maybe we'll get some more details, he is saying that his mother was not there for him. And I think he was adopted, I'm not sure. But at the very least, we from that statement know that he was abandoned or just denied access to his mother. And that does a lot of things to you when you're young. And it also sounds like he was saying, I've lived my whole life defending my mom because it's unseemly to talk bad about your mom. And I think I'm just realizing now that I have a lot of resentment about that, or I have a lot of damage about that or something. And that is totally in line with my hypothesis about Michael, that relational traumas in his childhood leads to him being extremely hypervigilant about losing other people because people have left him. And when you're terrified of losing people, particularly if the trauma, I'm guessing for whatever reason, the conclusion that he drew when he was abandoned as a young person was that he was a bad person, that he was shameful in some way. He wasn't good enough in some way. And he learned to lie to people as a way of trying to get other people to like him. That, you could see him at 7 years old saying that I live in a big house and my dad has a BMW. You could imagine Michael saying something like that. The way that Michael talks about his inflated salary, you could imagine him as a young person trying to get approval by saying that. And maybe he did. Maybe he gets a little bit of, because when you walk around in a chronic, constant sense of feeling worthless and no one likes you, you'll resort to some very, crude shortcuts to just get a little bit of approval. But of course, when you take shortcuts, you run the risk of it going badly. And then people go, he's a liar, so we're going to reject him. And then your reputation precedes you and no one wants to be your friend, and now you're really alone. So I wonder, but it's all unconscious. It's not like people, choose this defense mechanism. It's developed early. It becomes habitual. You could almost say it's neurologically habitual. And then you grow up and you end up panicking because he's worried he's going to get rejected by Meka, and then he starts to lie about all sorts of things. I could absolutely see him agreeing at least with part of what I'm saying if I were to throw that out there. Let's see if he actually talks more about this.
The effect of not having my mom around has manifested itself in a multitude of areas of my life. And for a long time, I made it be okay. And I've created or allowed creation of narratives about her to not be bad by comparison, because that's not how you talk about. That's not how you talk about the woman that gave birth to you. You take whatever that base is and you make it better. You cultivate, you excavate, you make stuff fit that doesn't fit, because that's what you have to do.
So from the beginning, I've been hypothesizing that Michael was abused, abandoned as a young person, and it appears to be true. There's so many different indications of it that I've been pointing to. One is a lack of eye contact, which is indicative of avoidant attachment, which is indicative of a very neglectful environment when you're a child. Essentially, when you're young, 1, 2, 3 years old, you have a lot of impulse to have eye contact when you want it. You where's mom? Where's dad? And you want to find, and then you want to find their eyes. And when your eyes meet each other, you're communicating things, and you feel as a young person seen and understood, and there's a mirroring effect of emotions and love and empathy that's communicated through eye contact. Well, when you're neglected, you look around, there's no one to be found. There's no eye contact to be found. And you're looking around, and then eventually you start to grieve the loss of the fact that no one is around, and then you just stop looking. And you'll see young kids who were neglected. You'll see two-year-old boys and girls who just, they don't look at you. They know you're there, but they don't look at you. Part of it is because they don't want to look, they don't want to be vulnerable and look and have you not look back at them. So they're like, don't bother looking. But another part of them is just saying, you know what, just turn off other people. It's no use to pay attention to the people, because they're just gonna abandon you. So don't start. Don't go down that road. Don't bark up that tree. So you won't see a lot of eye contact. The other thing is he does a lot of this. He's very frequently touching his facial hair, and although I don't know, when you're neglected, you're neglected touch. You aren't touched enough. You don't have enough time laying and sleeping on your parents or your siblings or your loved ones. And so you're just left in the crib, or you're just left on the floor with some toys. And so you need some indication, some caressing, but you're constantly being denied that. And as an adult, when you're upset particularly, you might do a lot of this. And actually, you'll see a lot of men do this, because boys in general are, on average, more neglected than girls are, because we as a society stupidly look at 2-year-old boys and think they're supposed to be tough because they're male, and will subsequently treat a 2-year-old boy as if he doesn't have emotions, as if coddling him is going to ruin him and make him a mama's boy or something. And so there's a lot of men you'll see men doing a lot of this to themselves, because they were denied touching growing up. And it's a good thing that they're doing this, because it actually does soothe them, but it indicates that they were likely neglected growing up. We also hear in his voice, he started to crack because he started to, really start to cry on the notion, on the phrase, because she gave birth to me. You don't talk badly about the woman that gave birth to you. You felt the meaning of that in his soul. That woman gave birth to me. And what did she do to me? We don't know. Maybe she was pulled away. Maybe she died. I don't know. But that raw feeling of she gave birth to me and she wasn't there for me, or whatever sort of sadness and pain is there for him. I'm really glad that Meka is able to see what's happening right now. Regardless of whether or not Meka wants to be in this marriage or not, she moved close. She is empathetic. She is seeing for this for what it is, which it just bolsters my respect for Meka. So when you have that kind of neglect growing up, another thing that you'll do, another sign that we saw Michael do, is that when he talks about pretty intense things, he comes across extremely intellectual. You can even see him in this moment. He's starting to have emotion well up for him. Sadness and grief are as welling up for him. And you see him using a lot of complicated vocabulary. This is intellectualization. Freud recognized this. Anna Freud recognized this as well back in the day. The neo-Freudians, Freudians, classical Freudians, recognized this, that when we have pain and we have strife on the inside, one of the defense mechanisms available to us is called intellectualization. Essentially, we're trying to get out of our heart and go into our, prefrontal cortex. We're trying to get to the part of our brain that is very, regimented and non-emotional. And it can work kind of in the moment, but ultimately it denies us the ability to express our feelings and let them out and take care of ourselves and allow other people to take care of us. Now, why would someone be intellectual? Well, because when they were 2, 3, 4 years old, they learned other people aren't going to be there for them. So they've got to do something. And I'm guessing that him, even at a young age, learned, well, if I act like a robot and I think of myself like a robot and I become very intellectual, like Mr. Spock or Data or whatever robot inspiration, then I can at least trick myself into believing that I don't have emotions and I don't have needs and I'm above it. So he exhibits some of that as well. But I really, really commend all three people in this instance for getting to this place, because this is really the core of the matter.
Whatever that base is, and you make it better. You cultivate, you excavate, you make stuff fit that doesn't fit. Because that's what you have to do.
To make something that doesn't make sense possibly make sense so that you can just move on and move forward and build.
Yep.
So good reflection, good summary from the therapist to encourage and validate.
That's what I know. That's what I'm good at. When I was a kid and I kind of found that I was adopted, there was a lot of me creating my own narrative and create this world for myself where I felt comfortable about who I was and what that meant for me. Because as a kid, you don't want to be teased for being adopted. You don't want to be teased for not having a dad or not knowing your mom. So there were stories that I definitely made up. And it's something that in some ways have manifested itself as an adult.
Oh, okay. So we're fitting a lot of details together that his mom gave him up for adoption. His parents gave him up for adoption. And he is framing that as, his mom not being there for him. Now, I would suspect that he was not adopted at birth. Maybe he was. So if he was adopted at birth or close to birth, and the adoptive parents were good enough, then everything I was saying doesn't have any meaning really, because the abandonment, the emotional abandonment, doesn't usually manifest in that situation. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was adopted into an adoptive family after 6 months. And that's usually kind of the time when kids start to notice oh, those people are my primary people and other people are not my primary. I'm attached to those people. It's 3 to 6 months is when that kicks in. So if you're adopted earlier than that, you don't really have time to identify which one of these people taking care of me are my main people. So pre-adoption, those months, you will see less issues in life. Adoption after those months, there's lots of research pointing towards a multitude of issues like drug addiction, dropping out of school, behavioral problems, relationship problems, depression, anxiety, all sorts of problems, all the problems that are created by trauma and abandonment. So I don't know, maybe he'll give some detail on that. So at this point, I don't know if he's talking about being neglected by his mom after 6 months, or just the idea of being adopted, which I guess I should talk a little bit about. So even if you are adopted close to birth, everyone that I've ever talked to as a client who was adopted always has some pain and grief around that, even if, like I said, they were adopted right away. It's a bit of an identity crisis to think, so my parents, whom I love, I'm not of their blood, and these other people gave birth to me, and they didn't want me. And even though intellectually you might think, well, they must have been young parents, and I'm glad they gave me up for adoption because I love my adoptive parents. But there's still something deep down that everyone I've ever talked to, there's a bit of a struggle. Now, the struggle can be short and can be minor, or it can be big and major. So, but everyone goes through that. So maybe that's what he's talking about, but I suspect not. I suspect because of the deception and this panic that he goes through because of disapproval, I'm guessing he was adopted later. But maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't.
It's a survival tactic. Being in the city, you learn how to move. You learn how to adjust. You learn how to figure stuff out on the fly.
How to protect yourself.
Right. And it serves you well. And
Okay, so that raises another hypothesis, maybe another factor that he is pointing out, which is absolutely a part of situations that I've treated before, people that I've treated before, which is absolutely seen in my clinical practice, which is that when you grow up in a neighborhood where you have to survive and hustle, then you learn to evade, and you also learn that you can't really trust other people, and that danger is everywhere. And you have to prop yourself up to survive. And so it sounds like that's what he's saying. Now, that might be all that it comes from. Maybe he was adopted early. He doesn't have attachment disruption or lived abandonment, if you will. And all of his sense of danger and attempts to please other people comes from the neighborhood he grew up in. I don't know.
I think the biggest thing for me, and as matriculating and getting older and maturing, is learning what about that is still necessary and what about that is I can let go. I have to do a better job of not allowing the past affect the present.
So I really hope the therapist jumps on that statement, because that is something I hear so many people say. A lot of you on YouTube will join me on the Q&A, and you know that inevitably there's a question like this. I have this trauma in my past and I keep having these repetitive behaviors. I need to learn how to let go. I need to stop dwelling on the past. I need to get over it. No, you cannot get over it. You cannot let go. You cannot not dwell on the past if you're already dwelling on the past. When you are traumatized, there are two things that can help you. One is awareness and the other is healing. Now, in awareness, this is cognitive therapy, it's narrative therapy, it's behavioral therapy. There's a lot of awareness types of therapy. You can, psychodynamic therapy is also awareness-based in a certain way. And then there's experiential healing, corrective experiences. Through those things, you can start to change your personality, your defense mechanisms, your sense of danger, so that your behavior will change. What he is saying is, I need to move on, and I need to stop lying, and I need to just stop. This is what we call white knuckling it in the addictions world. It's just like, okay, I'm just gonna, the white knuckling comes from Alcoholics Anonymous, where people will say, I just need to stop drinking. I'm gonna white knuckle it, like you're grabbing onto the wheel of the car, and I'm just not gonna drink. That never works. It never works. You cannot white knuckle it. It's not a matter of willpower. If it was a matter of willpower, things would have changed before because you want to change. So we've got to get over that idea that you can get over things. It's a matter of self-awareness and healing. And where do we get that? In therapy. So get therapy. Or there are avenues of self-help, I suppose, self-discovery. But the effort is to know thyself and heal thyself.
I haven't been super transparent in expressing how I really felt about it. I've been making do and getting along to get along. It has creeped up and bled into the other areas in our relationship and our marriage and affected things in a way that has created some distrust, solely the foundation of our marriage, and has led to where we are now. And that is my fault, and I accept that.
What's your response to him?
That's like the first time he's opened up. I think for me, it's kind of like a piece of the puzzle that I've been missing, of trying to understand why things are the way they are and why certain situations go the way that they do. That was
So great. Meka is like, oh, this explains a lot. And I'm so glad that he's putting this forward. And this is another plug for couples therapy. This is one of the wonderful things that can happen in couples therapy, where I will spend maybe even a whole session talking to one person while the other member of the couple watches and learns so much. It provides so much explanation. Meka, before this meeting, was like, he's a liar and there's something wrong with him and we're getting a divorce. After hearing him break down and talk to a third party where he feels safe enough to do so, Meka's like, whoa, now I see why he's doing these things. Now, Meka might still say, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this. But it really helps to understand why people do things. Almost everything that, so I'm going to say something. I'm going to say one of my things that I often say, which is, there's a possibility that, well, let me back up. Think of all your ex-boyfriends, girlfriends, they friends. Think of all your exes and think of all the ones you hated and the ones that treated you badly. There's a possibility that every single one of their bad behaviors towards you and other people is explained by a soft, vulnerable, scared underbelly in that person's personality. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but it really explains it. And that person probably had no control over their defense mechanisms. And if they were treated better growing up or given enough therapy in their teen years and early 20s, they might have healed and become aware, whereas they wouldn't have done that behavior. And that isn't to say that they're off the hook. It just means that it's understandable. It doesn't mean you should have stayed with those people, but it does mean that the narrative changes about that individual. There's a chance that your worst nightmare of an ex in the past has a completely reasonable reason as to why they did what they did. It doesn't mean you have to be with them, but it does change the narrative from that was a narcissistic gaslighter to that person was terribly mistreated and developed early in life ways of coping that were good for them when they were 2, 3, 4 years old, but ultimately self-destructive when they were older.
a big part of it, and that's something I didn't know. So I definitely appreciate the fact that he shared it with me, and I hope that he continues to be honest and like open up in that way. I felt like I did see a lot of vulnerability tonight from Michael. I think he has a lot of shame about his upbringing, about who he is. He is not happy with who he is. The fact that he's like trying to craft it to be what looks best says that he's not comfortable with his truth.
2 thumbs up, Meka. That's not how I was seeing it, but that is a wonderful way to see it. That he's so ashamed of who he is, he can't be his truth. I can't remember the way she said it. She said it much better. Anyway, it was a very wonderful way of summarizing what I think is very true.
Do you want to feel like a unit with her? Do you want to build this marriage?
Yeah, a part of me does. And I think the other part is just the fear.
She has to feel that you have progressed in this area in order to accept that you will be her husband for the long run.
So this is essentially just piling on the notion that he just needs to be a better person and get over it. If I were her, I would say, well, let's dedicate ourselves, or let's get you to therapy so you can work on this and actually get to the underlying issues and heal so that you will just naturally behave differently. What she's basically saying here is, do you commit yourself to not doing what you did in the past? That doesn't work. I'm here to tell you. There's a chance it'll work, maybe, for Michael, but I doubt it. I heavily doubt it. But maybe this will prove me wrong. So I don't like where this is going because it's not a setup for success.
You're going to have to stick your neck out, or else you're dead in the water. It's going to be over, and you're going to lose her.
So this is a doctoral level marriage and family therapist, essentially just telling someone, knock it off. You know, it's this joke, right, where therapists often will make this joke of, don't you ever just want to grab your clients and shake them and say, knock it off? You know, it's just, I don't know, it's a joke. I've never actually had that impulse because I guess I was trained well enough by mentors that really inspired me on the true nature of therapy and the true nature of humans, really. And that's essentially what's happening right here. It's just like, okay, are you going to commit yourself to never doing this again? Well, I'm guessing from the beginning he was committing himself to never doing it again. He's probably done this with countless relationships in the past. This isn't the first time he's had a relationship. This isn't the first time he's been deceptive in all likelihood because of his panic. So if all it took was him just say, okay, I'm not going to do it, then, you know, he would have not done it from the beginning. So now maybe the therapist will throw other stuff out here and say, well, if you commit, then you're committing to therapy. That would be the rational thing to say in that moment. All right, well, that does it for that episode. If you want to subscribe below or hit the bell or like this video or comment below, what do you think about what I'm saying? Become a patron on Patreon. That would be awesome. And take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.